Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Gruber Wired. I'm Mark Beach.
I'm John Dotson, and welcome back once again.
Woo! It's a hot Phoenix. Yeah, we're in it now.
That we are.
100-degree day yet?
I think
maybe?
Today we topped at 100 and looking to be 102 tomorrow. But the good news is next week we'll be in the 90s. So
yes, we're going to jump right in because we're rolling some video. This is kind of some cool stuff here.
Yeah, we're kind of get back to the basics of cabling, right? And talk a little bit about that today. And so what this is, we're actually seeing some manufacturing of this taking place.
And this is actually fiber, but we're going to do copper today.
Correct. Yeah,
and we're going to be talking about that.
Some copper here in this video in a
show.
There we go.
Which is kind of cool. So there's strands that are being fed into a machine, and somewhere along the line here it gets jacketed.
Nice purple jacket. Look at that.
Yeah, and these are
jacket material, right?
Yeah, that's the material that they use. Apparently, they make like lots of little pellets out of it, and then they heat it up and coat the wire. Once it's all spun up, little auto feed here. Keep the
look at that.
Yep, it goes in one side, comes out jacketed.
Those white little pebbles are the plastic coating, the jack that goes over it, or is it the shielding?
No, that should be the coating.
That's the plastic material,
that's being used.
So it's not all white. You'll notice there's little like pigments in there. So that's what determines the color. So it's all that white and then little pigment nuggets in there that's the technical term, nuggets.
Nuggets?
Yeah.
The little nuggets, look at that.
Yeah, that go in there, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. And, one of the things about it is copper's pretty universal, right?
Right.
So we get back to the basics of copper. And what is copper? I mean, copper is an ore that comes from the ground that we've used to mine and use it for various purposes. And back in the day, they realized that it could conduct electricity.
Yeah.
And so we found a way to take that ore, turn it into a viable product in order to use it for different electrical purposes.
Yes, and data.
And our world is low voltage.
Yes.
So
they call it low voltage though because it can handle like power over Ethernet stuff. So it can, when you like plug in your conference room phone and it lights up. That's the power over the Ethernet. It's kind of like with sound, it's like phantom power.
Yeah,
almost.
And we're seeing a lot more uses for that power over Ethernet, especially like security cameras, doorways, and things of that nature.
Right. So, first thing we were going to talk about was just the different types of category cabling.
Exactly what we're going to get into.
Yeah, it's some important stuff. I think it's, where Gruber Industries is founded. It's our foundation and something that we're good at.
Yeah, it was kind of rooted in our history.
Yes.
And so
as all the tariff uncertainty continues to wave out there, American made is the way to go.
That's it.
And so our category cables, American made.
USA made all the way through and through. USA made copper cabling as well as the connectors too.
Right.
Now let's start with the classifications, right?
Yes.
I know that we start in here with our sheet says category 5, but I know we started back at category 1 years and years ago.
Right. And we'll cover the history.
Yeah.
You want to cover it now or
no? We can go through this, but I'm just kind of timeline. So we're going to discuss Cat 5 to begin with.
Right. And usually when somebody asks for Cat 5, they really mean Cat 5e. Because Cat 5 is obsolete, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yep. And it's so the max speed, the difference between what the old Cat 5 was and the Cat 5e is that it can handle a gigabit per second.
Correct.
Which back in the day, that seemed like a lot. I remember,
that was pushing it back in the day.
We went from 10 100 networks. They were 10 base T. So that was basically 10 megabits to 10 100, and then to the gigalans,
gigs. Here we go, gigs.
Yep. And, it's something that's still in use, Cat 5e.
It is, and the one thing about it, especially with the Cat 5e cable that we've used previously and built for people, don't forget all of our cabling comes with a lifetime warranty because it is still practical, it is good, it's still viable, and we guarantee our product. Then a little shout out from Gruber Motor Company there on the lifetime warranty.
There we go.
But as we take a look at things and we progress through all sorts of technology, we find ourselves going from Cat 5e, making that jump to Cat 6.
Which is now becoming the new minimum standard. Now,
correct.
Cat 6, if you have a 5e network, 6 works on a 5e network.
Yes, everything is backwards compatible. Which is a good thing to remember when you're dealing with copper cabling. You're not going to be able to jump up a step, but you can take a step back.
So if your switches are, 5e, then a Cat 6 cable will work.
Correct.
If it's Cat 6 switch, 5e will not work.
It will not work.
No.
Correct. You will have problems.
But
when we get into the Cat 6 world, now we're talking about, 10 gigs, right? That we're getting up to the capability of.
And it has to do with distance, right?
Correct.
So it can handle 10 gigabits per second up to 55 meters.
Yeah.
And then 1 gig up to 100 meters.
Yep. And then when they decide, well, we need to push it a little further, right? So we came up with Cat 6A, which is Cat 6 augmented. Now, what did people ask all the time, what is the difference between A and Cat 6? I mean, and when you're looking at the interior development of the cabling, a lot of times when you see the upgrade, it has to do with the way we twist those pairs inside. Because it changes the magnetic field that's used throughout the cabling. So what that does is it cuts down on crosstalk and noise that could get into the cable and cause problems. So they reduce that footprint by doing so in order to give you a longer length,
And it has to do with the bandwidth that can be, so basically that's the frequency of the data transmission that can pass through that copper, just kind of like we deal with fiber, where different light waves, different nanometer lengths can be transmitted through the fiber, It's the same thing with copper. It's in 6A is rated up to 500, but actually our Quabbin cable's rated to 550, I believe.
It is 550, correct. And it probably pushed a little more. They rated up to that speed, but I tell you, it's a well-built cable.
And it's 10 gigabits to 100 meters, so a little over 300 feet, 328 feet. Good stuff.
And then, of course, Cat 7 comes into play. Category 7 cabling, we do get a call for it from time to time, but not as one would think.
It's more European.
It is a European standard, right? So where we see that call come into play is where we may have some businesses that are relocating to the United States from Europe or investing in building and manufacturing. And so that's when we will see kind of those specs come into play. But it's really not called for all that often.
No, and it's, again, there's more copper involved. They're thicker cables. Same with the Cat 8. They're thicker cables. They can handle more data, but there's a technology cost to it.
Jesse, you want to pull up video number 2? Since we're talking about the types of cables, this little video is going to show us a little more information in regards to the types of cables. You can see there in the history of it too. So it goes from Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3, 4, 5. This is where we are talking the history of this, right?
And Cat 1 is just your phone line, basically. Everybody will remember, your phone lines. Cat 2 was rare. That was used in IBM token ring environments. So that was basically in cross-computer connections.
So it's very specific. It wasn't like a broadband type application.
Correct. And the max data speed on that was 4 megabits a second.
4.
But back then, it was big, blazing right there. And then the Cat 3 is the 10 base T that we talked about earlier, which is the 10 megabits a second.
We still get a call for Cat 3.
Right.
Just so you know, that's still out there. It's still available in the marketplace. Not as prevalent as, say, a Cat 5 or Cat 6,
Sure.
But there are still a lot of application purposes that are using this particular type of cable.
Like FAA.
FAA does still currently use Cat 3.
Right. Until Elon gets his hands on them, then
Right.
then something will change probably.
Well, they sent me a large piece of Cat 3 that we keep here to make assemblies for the FAA.
Right.
But it still works and serves its purpose. So it's not, people might say Cat 3 is outdated. Well, that's all relevant to the scope of work, right?
Right.
So just continue to think about it that way too when you're going in and doing installations or upgrading. What is relevant and what's not? Because a lot of times we're still using a lot of this cabling that still serves its purpose. It doesn't mean it's old, doesn't mean it's outdated per se.
Right.
So yeah.
And then there's, Cat 4. So that was the initial 4 twisted pairs.
Yeah.
It wasn't used too long before it jumped right to Cat 5 because that was only 16 megabits a second. But then the improvement, a dramatic shift happened with the Cat 5. So you don't hear a lot about Cat 4.
No.
That wasn't
It's
around long.
a brief moment in time.
Right.
But you can see there, from there we go to Cat 5, Cat 6, Cat 6A, Cat 7, 7A, and then 8. 8 is the newest in the marketplace. It's out there. Again, it's still so new, it's not as widespread or is being used yet as a necessity.
Right. And it's not a typical RJ45 termination either because of the thickness of the wire.
Correct.
Then there's new connectors that are also part of that whole setup. So from TikTok, Damian Hopkins, 689. We still use it in Jamaica for telephone service. Might be referring to Cat 3 or Cat 1.
Cat 3 or Cat 1 is still being used in Jamaica. That is cool, right? You know what I'm saying? It's not that it's outdated. I mean, it's still around and still being used.
Right.
So, there's still a history there.
The copper's going to work.
Yeah.
Right. And you're right. It all depends on what equipment you're connecting as to whether you need it or not. Right. As to whether you need upgrade or whether, you can get by with what you have, because the data transmission rate really is on the TX side or transmission side and the receive side. That really determines what you need in between it.
Correct.
Not the cable.
Which goes back to when you're looking at putting in an installation, even if you're doing this from home for yourself or you're in business, make sure you do your homework and understand what application purposes you need and what cabling fits best suited for that.
Right.
You want to go to the next video? It's number 3 there. So talk about cabling and twisted pairs. We got a little bit of video here to show that as well. As we can see here. Guys out there working on it. Yep. It's a big cable there.
That's something else, but yeah. So we talk about stranded versus solid cable,
correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And each has its purpose. Obviously, solid copper cabling is not something you want to have moving around a lot.
Correct, which is why it's used as like a backbone scenario of your installation. Something that's a longer run.
Put in walls or whatever, not moved, and then you have the patch cables that we make that are made from stranded copper.
Correct.
Right? Mm-hmm. Because when you think about, you want to move it, right, and do all this with it, solid copper is not going to do too well like that. It's going to, bend and stay, and then you have to bend it again. And think about that over time.
Yeah,
right?
You got wear and tear.
Breaks.
Your stranded cables can give you a lot more flexibility.
Right.
And that's really the reason for the stranded cabling is to give you that flexibility within their system. And so
right. And solid copper does have a better throughput as far as data transmission because for obvious reasons, it's one piece of copper and the signal is just running straight through there. Whereas it's bound within the strands instead. And so you have it being conducted over all of them, but it's, there's going to be a lot going on in between them.
Correct. And the solid is purposely there for that long distance run.
Right.
Okay. So cool.
Getting all twisty there.
Showing all different types of cabling. Good stuff. Now this is thick. This is a bit different type of wire, but there we go, showing some stranded stuff coming together.
Yeah, I mean, I find that just amazing how it's like a ballet of wire.
That's a good way to put it.
Yep.
Because it really is a production. I mean, look at all the machinery and everything they go through. It's crazy in my mind.
Yep.
And someone had to come up with this thought.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Put it down on paper and say, hey. Yeah, fun stuff.
I agree.
What's next on our agenda here?
So, you know, we talked about, you know, the construction and shielded versus stranded. And, you know, I'm sorry, we didn't talk about shielded, solid versus stranded.
Solid, yeah.
And then, so now then we're talking about shielded versus unshielded, right?
Yeah.
Cables come. So one thing that I found really interesting when we buy like pull boxes and things like that, that you have to have a reel for shielded cable, right?
Correct.
Because it's so heavy, it's so
Yes.
thick, as opposed to pull boxes for unshielded cable.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see a lot of installers that will, you know, request 1,000 feet and, you know, I want shielded, and can I get that in a pull box? No.
Yeah. No.
They don't come that way for a reason.
No, it's a weight issue. I mean, honestly, there. But the bigger issue is people to understand why shielding and why not.
Right.
Shielding is a misperception out there sometimes that shielding is also armored cabling.
Right.
And that's not the purpose of it at all. Shielding is there to help reduce the footprint of crosstalk.
Right.
And hopefully give you a better transmission signal, right?
Exactly.
So there's times when you're going to need that depending on your situation and your installation. That's going to call for the use of shielding in the cabling.
Right. And a lot of times too, you know, you have a lot of different cables running together, and it could be running along power as well.
Correct.
Right. You want to block out that electromagnetic interference.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of people have done, you know, or looked at coax cable before, so you know that the metal braiding that's on the outside of it, that grounds it, right?
Correct.
Well, that's shielding basically. It serves as a ground as well, but it's braiding that keeps that solid core in the coax from experiencing interference when you're delivering a video signal.
Correct. And the thing to know about this too is if you're using a shielded cable, okay, make sure you're using shielding throughout your entire build on that cable.
Right.
So that's your connectors too, your RJ45 plugs, your F connector, whatever cable you're working with. Make sure that not only using the shielding cable, but you have the correct shielding on the connectors as well.
Right. And the shielding is only as good as the ground
Correct.
that it's connected to. So, you know, it can make things worse if it's not grounded than better, right?
Yeah. And, you know, so you have your shielding, then you have armored. Now, the reason for armored cable, and probably 99% of the reason for armored cable is
Ratatouille.
Ratatouille, rodent protection.
Yep.
It's strictly there to make sure that a rodent or animal or anyone can't chew and gnaw through that cable.
Right. And you would think, you know, when you hear that, you think, well, where would that be?
We've seen it on very many
New York City.
places. Yeah. You ever been to subways in New York City?
Yeah.
They got some pretty good sized rats down there.
Although we got roof rats here too.
We got rats in our office. I just don't want to name them.
Well, no. I don't think those kind of rats will be gnawing on cables. Yeah, no, but really, I mean, you know, the roof rats. It's more in like Arcadia and those kind of area where there's a lot of citrus and all that.
I've seen this a lot. Not only roof rats, but also pack rats.
Yeah,
okay, we have in the desert. We have a lot of pack rats, and I used to do pest control for a living, right? And I would get calls throughout the year, various calls, but a lot of times you would find pack rats get into the engine components of vehicles and chew the wiring harnesses.
Yeah.
Then somebody get up in the morning, go out, start their vehicle, and it doesn't run.
Yeah.
You know, and I've seen that numerous times out in the desert locations.
Right. So that's why there's armored.
That's why we have armored.
Yep. Very important.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, yeah.
All right.
Fun stuff.
One of the things. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I insist.
Go ahead. What you got there, buddy?
So, one of the reasons why we started this conversation and decided to go this direction was that we wanted to talk about cable construction, and
Correct.
jacketing came up. I have a customer who's looking for boat cable.
Yeah, that's correct. We were talking about that.
Right. And so, depending on how the jacket's made, will determine whether it'll meet specs.
Correct.
And there's many kinds of jackets. I mean, we've learned through our exploration of the immersion cooling of all the different types of jacketing. But when you're talking about basic out in the air type of jacketing for cables, we have PVC, we have polyurethane, and we have TPE, which is thermoplastic elastomer.
There you go.
And for a boat, you got to think about what does it need to be resistant to.
And you also think about the conditions the boat's going to be in. Oh, this particular model you're talking about, is this a boat that's going to be out on, say, with us here, a freshwater lake like Lake Pleasant? Or is this going to be in the ocean, something that carries a lot of salt water, a different harsh environment?
Well, and I think that for the most part, we're talking about an environment, regardless of where the boat is, of dealing with gasoline, dealing with oils, dealing with heat, potential flame, slag from welding, all the different things. There's acids. Yeah. That it needs to be resistant to. So when we did the comparison, we looked at a bunch of different things. How did it perform on heat, oil, whether it's flexible in low temperatures, right?
Yeah.
How does it deal with being in the sun and with weather? Ozone, abrasion, electrical properties. Was it flame resistant? Right?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Huge for a boat. Yeah. You can't have something just go.
That's huge anywhere. You don't want that in your office going.
No. Nuclear radiation.
That's an interesting one.
That
I saw that
really,
on the list.
really odd category there, but okay. I guess if you're, flying Air Force One, that would be important.
Well, I imagine it does come play when we're talking about jackets when you get into areas of where you're dealing with the nuclear, like, Palo Verde nuclear plant out here, where you have to have this cabling to help with the installation of the nuclear reactor.
Right. And you hope it never needs to be exposed to it.
No, we hope not.
Right. But then, waters, acids, alkalis, gasoline, degreaser solvents, alcohol, and then we talk about slag. So, the different types of jackets have their strengths. But the more higher performing the material, the more expensive it is.
Sure.
Right. So you have to there's always that nexus of price point versus
application.
Versus performance, right? Yeah. And that's what we look at. When customers come to us with ideas or issues or trying to find a solution, we try and identify price tolerance because that kind of really determines the direction we're going to go.
Correct.
Yeah.
But there's certain situations where you need the proper cable for the proper job. The price has nothing to do with it. Take price out of the equation. You need to make sure that you are using the proper cabling,
right?
For the scope of work.
You're not going to go cheap in a submarine.
No, thank you. You want to play video number 7? So yeah, this is a little bit of video showing how that jack is prepared and put on this cabling. And so typically what we sell here, right, is your regular standard PVC riser jacket,
right?
Plenum. Plenum is another one people ask a lot of times. I'm seeing more and more as I learned something new about plenum the other day. And a lot of this happened, I believe it was on Manhattan,
okay,
where there's so much pre-existing cabling that's been installed. They're not going to remove all that cabling from the buildings when they're doing their upgrades.
Right.
So to help in case of a fire, they're automatically using plenum, whether it's called for or not, due to city code.
Okay.
So they're just going ahead and putting in the new system with nothing but plenum cabling,
Really?
patch cables, everything, all the way through. because there's already a certain amount of cabling within the installation that they're not going to remove.
Right.
So why add to the problem if there was a fire?
Right.
I mean, good thinking, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Couldn't get number 7 to play. So,
if you have any comments while we're doing this live, feel free to share. We'll try and address your.
correct. Yeah, on the jackets now. So jackets do come in a variety of colors too. Okay.
Yep. There's the tweed. There's. No.
So this is just a video showing how that jacket's put on.
Right.
We saw some of this earlier in the other shots.
And again, you see the little pigments in there. Mm-hmm. You wonder, how does it turn from white to black?
Yeah, those little color pigments.
Yep.
And interesting enough, though, a lot of copper cabling you'll find in various colors, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a specific color means a type of copper cabling. Unlike where when you get into fiber,
right,
a color can determine the type of mode of fiber that you're using.
Right. The outside jacket typically is related to the speed of the fiber.
When you're talking fiber, correct.
Right.
But when it comes to copper cabling, hey, I sell plenty of pink cable. I sell plenty of purple.
I'll tell you, walking in the back there some days is a shock because it's just mounds of pink cable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of,
there we go. That's probably the pigment for it, right?
Yep. I would think. So yeah, it's when you think of what's inside the cable, so you're twisting the copper together if you're doing stranded, then you are twisting the pairs together, and you're twisting, so you have the pairs together, and then you have pairs of pairs or groups of pairs,
and you're twisting
with the insulation in there, right? And then you jacket it. Right. So,
correct.
I mean, there's a lot involved. And it's amazing. It's so inexpensive because they can just churn this stuff out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is. When you stop to look at it, even our USA made cables, if you think longevity over time,
right?
Because of quality,
they're
you're
well
saving
made.
money.
Yeah. They're well made. And that's the thing. I mean, you get people who know what they're doing. That's why we do business with the companies we do business with.
Yeah.
Reliable product, long-term, great longevity, something that we can get behind with a lifetime warranty on, the patch cables and the whatnot that we make. It's important to have that confidence and know that even the ratings on the cable exceed the specifications for that particular category, right?
Yeah.
They exceed where they need to be so that performance is never an issue.
Yeah. And it's great. We've, like I said, 40 years of business. I know I've personally seen maybe using that lifetime warranty twice, I believe now.
Yeah.
So it's a good quality product. It lasts.
There
So quick recap maybe before we end today. What did we go over since we're talking the basics of cabling?
Yep.
We start talking about the cable types, what type of category cabling there is.
The history a little bit, the solid or stranded, shielded or unshielded, the types of jackets. That's really what we know. You know, that's where we're at.
It's just kind of the basics of basics. In a half hour, we covered quite a bit.
But
time goes so fast.
It's important, and whether you're an installer or an end user, not all category cables are the same. You just don't go to Best Buy and grab a cable off the shelf and plug it in. You should know what it is.
Yeah.
Because if you're plugging in a 10 gig connection and you buy the, I guess a Cat 5e would work.
Yeah.
But, we'll say it's a 100 gig connection, right? That's not going to work.
No.
So it depends on what you're connecting it to. And admittedly, even, being technical or a techie, working on the computer end of things, I was never really thinking about that.
Yeah.
I just thought, well, they just have the most current stuff on the shelf, right? Not always.
It's not always. You got to
No.
do your due diligence.
Yes,
Take a
absolutely.
look. Hey, I want to say thank you. Is it Damon that commented earlier from Jamaica?
I don't remember his.
Is that who it was?
Damien.
Hey, Damien, thank you for chiming in. We appreciate it, even from all those people around the world that like to chime in from time to time. We do appreciate it. So thank you for watching.
Yes, sir.
So.
And you're not going to be here next week.
I will not be here next week. We've got some family coming in from out of town, back from New York.
Right.
Got some birthdays going on. We're going to see the Grand Canyon. We're going to head to L.A. for a few days and see some family in L.A.
Very cool.
So it'll be a busy week. Be a lot of fun.
You're going to need to come back to work to get some rest.
Probably.
Right?
So
That's a good kind of break, though. Well, we appreciate you being here. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast. We're here every Thursday, 3 p.m. Arizona time. So thanks for being here today. For now, I'm Mark Beach.
I'm John Dotson, and one last bit, I want to say thank you to our staff behind the scenes, Aaron, Jesse, Cass. We really appreciate everything you do. So thank you.
Peace.
You have a wonderful day.